A quiet neighborhood rests under the soft glow of suburban streetlights. The lawns are trimmed, the fences clean, and behind every window families sleep in safety, or at least they think they do. In the middle of that calm stands a small two-story house, white curtains drawn, a faint porch light flickering against the cold November air. On that front door, a small black doorbell camera blinks, silent, watchful, unaware it is about to witness something that will shatter the illusion of peace forever. Sheylla Cabrera moved into that house just 3 months ago. 29 years old, a nurse at the local hospital, a single mother trying to rebuild what life had quietly taken from her. To the neighbors, she was the woman with the kind smile, the one who waved every morning on her way to work, always rushing but never rude. To her patients, she was gentle and patient, the kind of nurse who remembered birthdays and sat with the lonely. But behind that soft face was someone learning to live again after a relationship that left her scarred in ways no one could see. At the hospital, she worked double shifts, trying to save enough for her son's schooling. Every night she returned home to the same quiet kitchen, made tea, and sat by the window scrolling through her phone, telling herself she was safe now. Sometimes she'd stop and look at the reflection in the glass, her eyes tired but peaceful. The bruises had faded, the fear hadn't. A month earlier, she'd told a friend that she'd been getting strange calls, the kind where no one speaks, just breathes. At first, she ignored them. Then one night, she found a single rose on her doorstep. No card, just the flower. She brushed it off, telling herself maybe it was a delivery mix-up, but deep down she knew better. She had felt that kind of control before, the silent messages, the small reminders that he was always near. To feel safe again, she bought a doorbell camera. "It's just a precaution," she told her sister over the phone. "Everyone's got one these days." Her sister laughed, said it was smart, told her she was finally moving on. That night, Sheylla installed it herself, following an online tutorial. The little device blinked to life, connecting to her phone. She smiled, proud of the small act of independence. She could see her front porch from anywhere now. She didn't know that one day, it would be the world watching her through that same lens. Life returned to its routine. Early mornings, coffee on the go, late nights filled with exhaustion. But there were moments, tiny ones, that made her pause. A shadow crossing her window late at night. The faint feeling of being followed while walking to her car after work. The way her dog barked at the door even when no one was there. Each time she convinced herself it was nothing. She'd been paranoid before. She didn't want to live afraid forever. Her co-workers noticed she had started carrying a small silver cross again, the one her mother gave her years ago. When asked about it, she smiled softly and said, "It just reminds me I'm protected." But protection can be a fragile thing. Safety can shatter without sound. On the evening of November 18th, 2022, Sheylla clocked out late. The hospital was quiet, the parking lot empty except for her car under the last flickering light. Her breath hung in the cold air as she walked, keys tight in her hand. She called her sister on the drive home, just to talk, just to fill the silence. She laughed a little, said she was exhausted, promised to call in the morning. Her sister remembered her last words clearly. "I can wait to just sleep in tomorrow." She arrived home past midnight. The street was silent, not a single car passing. She parked, grabbed her bag, and climbed the steps to her front door. The porch light buzzed faintly. She glanced at her phone to unlock the door, the doorbell camera blinking once, recording as always. Inside, the house was warm, untouched. She hung her coat, placed her keys in the bowl, and took a deep breath. Another long day done. She poured herself a cup of tea, walked to the window and looked outside. Everything seemed still. But stillness can hide many things. Across the street behind a parked car, someone watched that same porch light flicker. Someone who had been waiting all night for her to come home. At 12:43 a.m., her phone buzzed, a notification from the Doorbell app. Motion detected. She frowned, curious, maybe a little uneasy. She checked the footage, saw nothing but the empty porch and the faint sway of tree shadows. She turned off the screen and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. Moments later, she turned off the lights and went to bed. Outside, a cold wind moved through the street. The doorbell camera blinked again. Somewhere between comfort and fear, between forgetting and remembering, Sheylla finally closed her eyes. In that quiet suburban house, surrounded by the illusion of safety, she believed she had escaped the worst. The doorbell camera stood guard, ready to capture what the human heart never can: truth without warning, tragedy without mercy. And in the calm before the knock, the world around her slept. But evil doesn't sleep. It waits. Years before that cold November night, Sheylla Cabrera believed she had found the love of her life. His name was Derek Morales, 33, a construction worker with a grin that could charm anyone in the room. When they first met at a friend's barbecue, he offered her a plate of food and said, "Someone as beautiful as you shouldn't stand in line." She blushed, laughed, and thought it was sweet. He called her the next day, and the day after that. Within weeks, they were inseparable. In the beginning, Derek was perfect. He showed up at her workplace with flowers, cooked her dinner after long shifts, and told her he couldn't believe how lucky he was. Her friends joked that she'd finally found a man who truly cared. Sheylla believed it too. When he talked about the future, a house, kids, a family, she could picture it all. For a woman who had spent years taking care of others, it felt good to be cared for. But love has a way of hiding its cracks until it's too late to step back. It started small. Derek asking where she was going, who she was texting, why she hadn't answered sooner. He'd apologize afterward, say he was just worried. Sheylla told herself it was love, that he just cared too much. When he started dropping by her job unexpectedly, she laughed it off. "He's protective," she'd say to her co-workers, trying to convince herself as much as them. Then came the first real argument. Sheylla had gone out for dinner with a friend from work. When she returned home, Derek was waiting outside her apartment, pacing. "You didn't tell me you were going out," he said. His voice was calm but sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. She tried to explain, but he grabbed her arm, not hard enough to bruise, just enough to make her freeze. "Don't do that again," he said. The next morning, he showed up with coffee and flowers, whispering that he was sorry, that he'd just been scared to lose her. She forgave him. Over the next year, those moments became patterns. Apologies turned into promises. Promises turned into control. He had copies of her house keys. He knew her schedule better than she did. If she was late coming home, his phone calls wouldn't stop. "I just want to make sure you're safe," he'd say. But Sheylla began to understand what he really meant. Her friends noticed first. "You don't laugh like you used to," one of them said quietly during lunch. Sheylla brushed it off, changed the subject. She didn't want to admit that the man who once made her feel alive now made her feel trapped. The day it all broke open started like any other. Sheylla had come home from work exhausted. Derek was waiting inside, angry. He had seen a photo on social media, her smiling with co-workers at a small birthday gathering. "Who's that guy next to you?" he asked. She tried to explain it was just a colleague, nothing more. But his jealousy burned. He threw her phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. The sound echoed, followed by a silence so heavy she could barely breathe. Then came the apology, the same old script. Tears, promises, pleading. "I just get scared," he said. "I love you too much." That night she slept on the couch, staring at the broken glass. Something inside her shifted. She realized this wasn't love anymore. It was control dressed as devotion. The next morning, while Derek was at work, she packed a small bag and drove to her sister's house. For the first time in months, she could breathe. Leaving him didn't end it. It never ends that easily. The calls started within days. At first, they were apologetic. Long voicemails filled with regret. "I just want to talk." Then came the guilt. "You owe me that much after everything we've been through." When she stopped answering, the tone changed. "You can't ignore me forever. I know where you are." She changed her number, moved to a new neighborhood, started over. For a while it worked. Sheylla went back to smiling at work, took her son to the park, even started going out with friends again. But every now and then, something would remind her. A familiar car parked down the street, a message from a private number, the sound of heavy footsteps outside her window at night. Her family told her to go to the police. She did once. They told her to document everything, to stay alert, to be careful. But what could she do? There was no proof, no crime yet, just fear. Sheylla told herself she was overreacting. She wanted to believe she had escaped him for good. Meanwhile, Derek grew more desperate. His friends noticed his temper worsening. He'd talk about her constantly, angry one moment, remorseful the next. "She ruined me," he told one coworker. "She doesn't get to just walk away." He spent nights driving past her old apartment even after knowing she'd moved. To him, the breakup wasn't the end. It was betrayal. On the surface, Sheylla's life looked normal again. But deep inside, the tension never really left. She'd check the locks twice before bed. She'd park closer to streetlights, always keep her phone in her hand when walking to her car. Fear became routine, a quiet companion she pretended not to notice. A week before her death, she called her best friend late at night. Her voice trembled. "I think he found me," she said. Her friend urged her to call the police again, but Sheylla refused. "I can't live scared forever," she whispered. "I just want peace." It's strange how ordinary days can carry the weight of fate. How a morning coffee, a casual text, or a quiet walk home can be the calm before everything falls apart. For Sheylla, that calm stretched thinner each day, until it finally snapped. Derek's obsession had turned into something darker, something beyond jealousy, beyond heartbreak. He watched her through social media, found her new address, waited for the right moment. To him, love had become ownership. To her, survival had become hope. And as the days passed, the distance between them wasn't measured in miles, but in how long it would take for the past to find her again. The night of November 18th began like any other Friday. The air was crisp, a thin layer of fog curling around the dim streetlights that lined Maplewood Drive. Inside her cozy home, Sheylla Cabrera kicked off her shoes and wrapped herself in a light sweater. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her son was spending the weekend with her sister, and for the first time in weeks, she had the night to herself. She turned on soft music, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and sank into the couch. On her phone, messages from her coworkers buzzed in, a few memes, some weekend plans. She smiled faintly. Life was finally feeling normal again. The new house, the distance from the past, it all made her believe that maybe the worst was over. Outside, the fog thickened, curling around the neighborhood like a silent curtain. A motion light flickered in the distance, and then darkness. At 11:42 p.m., her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She hesitated, staring at the screen. The same number had called her the night before. No voicemail, no message, just silence. She muted the phone and placed it face down. A chill crept through her body, but she brushed it off. "Not tonight," she whispered to herself, pulling the blanket tighter. At 12:06 a.m., the doorbell camera detected motion. The faint electronic chime echoed in her living room, but she barely noticed it over the music. The footage showed only a dark porch, swaying tree shadows, and the distant headlights of a passing car. She got up, turned off the music, and stood still for a moment. The quiet pressed against her, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, her breath, nothing else. Still, her heart beat faster. She walked to the window and peered through the blinds. The street was empty. At 12:21 a.m., she sent a quick text to her sister. "You awake? Thought I heard something outside." Her sister replied a minute later, "Probably just the wind, girl. Go to sleep." Sheylla laughed softly. "Yeah, probably." She turned on the porch light through her phone app, just in case. The porch flooded with a soft yellow glow. Nothing moved. She sighed, shaking her head, and turned to head back to bed. The doorbell camera blinked red again, recording. Somewhere near the edge of the driveway, a shape lingered, still, watching. At 12:34 a.m., Another notification buzzed on her phone. Motion detected. She opened the feed. The porch was empty again, just the faint movement of fog. But something was different, something she couldn't quite name. The light on the side of the house flickered twice. Her stomach tightened. Then came a sound, a single sharp knock. She froze. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. One knock, then silence. She waited, barely breathing. Another knock followed, softer this time, like whoever stood there didn't want to be heard. She picked up her phone again, her thumb hovering over the call icon. Instead, she opened the camera feed. The image was blurry. Fog rolling across the porch, the faint outline of the doormat. She didn't see anyone. Her voice trembled as she called out, "Who's there?" No answer. She took a step toward the door. The floor creaked under her feet. Her reflection in the window looked back at her. Small, frightened. She gripped the doorknob but didn't turn it. She called out again, louder this time. "Who's there?" Still silence. For a long moment she stood frozen, listening. And then her phone buzzed again, a text message from that same unknown number. "You look beautiful tonight." The mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Her heart pounded so hard it drowned out every other sound. She stumbled backward, whispering, "No, no." She grabbed her phone, backing away from the door, her shaking fingers fumbling to dial 911. Then, another sound. This time not a knock. A soft scrape, like shoes shifting on wood. She ran to the hallway, clutching her phone, whispering into the call, "Someone's outside my house, please, someone's here." The dispatcher asked her to stay calm, to lock herself in a room. But Sheylla couldn't. She was thinking of her son's photo on the shelf, her sister's laughter, her mother's voice. She couldn't let him, whoever he was, invade her home again. She crept back toward the door, trying to see through the peephole. Nothing. Only the soft glow of the porch light. She turned the deadbolt slowly, testing it. Locked. A sound came from the side of the house now. A faint thud, then another. Her breath quickened. "He's trying to get in," she whispered to the dispatcher. "Ma'am, stay inside. Officers are on their way. Do not go near the door." But fear does strange things to reason. She wanted to see, to know. At 12:42 a.m., the doorbell rang. Not a knock, a ring. A long, haunting chime that echoed through the empty house. Sheylla froze. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. She turned toward the sound, eyes wide. Slowly, she stepped closer, each breath trembling in her chest. "Derek," she whispered. No answer. Only the soft hum of the porch light. The camera caught her silhouette approaching, one hand on the doorframe, the other holding her phone again. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. She pressed her lips together, her voice barely audible. "Please, just go." The figure outside shifted slightly, stepping into view for a split second. Tall, broad shoulders, face shadowed under a hoodie. The doorbell blinked red again. Recording. Sheylla turned back toward the camera as if she knew it was her only witness. Then she reached for the handle, not to open it, but to check it again. Locked. The next second, a sharp noise filled the air. The sound of force, of violence, of chaos breaking through calm. The footage blurred as the camera jolted. And then, silence. The light on the porch flickered, the wind howled, and the doorbell's small red light continued to blink. Steady, unfeeling, eternal. At 12:47 a.m., the recording stopped. The neighborhood stayed quiet. No one heard her scream. The camera saw it all. But Sheylla Cabrera never would again. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over Maplewood Drive, its golden light spilling across the manicured lawns and quiet streets. To anyone passing by, it was just another peaceful Saturday in the suburbs. But behind the white door at the end of the block, a story far darker than anyone could imagine had already unfolded. At 7:15 a.m., a neighbor named Carla stepped outside to get her newspaper. She noticed something strange. A shattered mug on the porch, a faint smear of what looked like spilled tea, and the front door slightly ajar. Carla frowned. She knew Sheylla. They had spoken just 2 days earlier about holiday plans. She called her name softly. "Sheylla, you okay, hun?" No answer. When she pushed the door open, the air inside felt heavy, wrong. The living room was eerily still, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound. A chair was overturned, and a phone lay cracked on the floor, its screen dark. Carla stepped back, her voice shaking as she whispered to herself. Something happened. She dialed 911. Within minutes, patrol cars flooded the street. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the calm, casting long shadows across the house. The first responding officer stepped inside, hand on his weapon, scanning each room. And then in the hallway leading to the kitchen, they found her. Sheylla Cabrera. The medical team pronounced her dead at the scene. No signs of forced entry, no robbery, nothing stolen, just silence. The only clue? The small doorbell camera blinking faintly, still connected to Wi-Fi. Detective Laura Mendez arrived shortly after. She was calm, composed, but her eyes told a different story. She'd seen hundreds of crime scenes in her career, but this one felt different. It felt personal. "Get the footage," she said quietly. "Start there." When the tech team extracted the data, the room fell silent. The footage was grainy at first, then clear enough to see her face, fear-stricken, confused, alone. The investigators watched in stunned silence as the sequence played out. The knocks, the hesitation, her whispered, "Derek," and then chaos. The sound was faint but unmistakable. The struggle, the fall, the silence that followed. Detective Mendez leaned forward, her voice low. "Rewind that. The part before she says his name." They played it again. And there it was. The shadow of a man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, his right hand gloved. He moved closer to the camera, face half hidden. But for a fraction of a second, the light from the porch reflected off something, a small scar across his cheek. They froze the frame. Mendez sighed. "We've got him." By that afternoon, Derek Morales was brought in for questioning. He didn't resist. In fact, he almost seemed calm, like he knew it was coming. Inside the sterile interrogation room, the camera recorded every twitch, every breath. Mendez sat across from him, a folder in front of her. "You were seen near Maplewood Drive last night." He shrugged. "I was driving around. Couldn't sleep." "You drove past her house 3 times, she said, flipping through photos of surveillance from nearby traffic cameras. His expression didn't change. "Coincidence," Mendez studied him. "You texted her at 12:40 a.m. You look beautiful tonight." That was less than 10 minutes before she died. His eyes narrowed slightly. "She never told me to stop." Mendez's jaw tightened. "She didn't have to. She left you." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he smiled. Small, cruel. "She couldn't leave me. She was mine." Those words hung in the air like poison. Later, when detectives reviewed Derek's car, they found fibers that matched Shella's sweater, a pair of gloves with faint traces of her blood, and his phone's GPS placing him on her street at 12:43 a.m., the exact minute the doorbell camera stopped recording. In the following weeks, the investigation unfolded piece by piece. Friends came forward with messages he'd sent them. Long rants about how Sheylla belonged to him, how she'd regret leaving. A neighbor recalled seeing his truck parked down the street days before the murder. Everything connected like pieces of a puzzle, forming the shape of obsession. At the courthouse, crowds gathered. Reporters held up microphones as Sheylla's family arrived, their faces pale, their eyes empty. Her mother clutched a photograph. Sheylla smiling in her nurse's scrubs, full of life. Inside the courtroom, the doorbell footage was played for the jury. You could hear a pin drop as Sheylla's trembling voice filled the room. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the ring, the scream, and the final sound, a body collapsing. Several jurors looked away. Her sister sobbed quietly. Derek just sat there, his hands folded neatly in his lap, eyes fixed on the table. When the verdict came, The courtroom held its breath. Guilty of first-degree murder. Sheylla's mother closed her eyes, tears running silently down her cheeks. The judge's voice was steady as she read the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. But justice, though served, couldn't bring peace. The footage went viral online. Millions of people watched that haunting final moment. Some said it was horrifying. Others said it was necessary, that the truth shouldn't be hidden. It became a symbol, a silent witness to the dangers so many victims face behind closed doors. Detective Mendez watched it once more before the case closed. She didn't flinch at the violence. She'd seen worse. What haunted her wasn't the sound, but Sheylla's face right before it happened. That moment of realization, of recognition, when love turns into terror. She turned off the screen and whispered to herself, "You deserved better." In the months that followed, the Cabrera family set up a foundation in her name. Sheylla S. Light, dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence get protection devices and legal aid. They used her story to teach others how to spot the signs before it's too late. The little doorbell camera was returned to the family. They never turned it on again. It sat in a small box, wrapped in cloth, a reminder of the night it saw everything, and said nothing. The street is quiet now. New families have moved in, children play in the yards, and the sound of laughter fills the air. But for those who know what happened on that porch, the house on Maplewood Drive will always be something else. A scar on an otherwise perfect street. And as the seasons change, the wind still moves through that neighborhood the same way it did that night. Gentle, cold, whispering through the leaves, as if it's still carrying her last breath, her final plea, into the silence that followed. Months passed, but the shadow of that night never really left Maplewood Drive. The neighbors stopped talking about it out loud, but everyone still felt it. The memory of the flashing lights, the quiet after the sirens, the eerie realization that evil had walked among them. Time dulled the headlines, but not the ache. For Sheylla's mother, every morning began the same way, sitting by the kitchen window, a cup of untouched coffee in her hands, staring at the front porch where her daughter had once stood. Sometimes, she imagined hearing the faint chime of the doorbell, her daughter's laughter following it echoing through the walls that now felt too silent. Detective Mendez tried to move on to other cases, but she could not shake the image from her mind. Sheylla's face on that screen, that final moment of disbelief. She began volunteering at the Cabrera Foundation on weekends, speaking at schools, community centers, and shelters. Her message was always the same. If something feels wrong, trust it. Don't wait for proof. Your fear might be the only warning you get. The foundation, Sheylla's Light, grew faster than anyone expected. Survivors began sharing their stories, women, men, even teenagers, all saying that Sheylla's case gave them the courage to leave before it was too late. The doorbell footage that once horrified the internet became something else entirely. A rallying cry for awareness, for change. At a candlelight vigil 1 year later, the air was cool, filled with the faint scent of lilies. Hundreds gathered with candles flickering softly against the dark. Her photo sat at the center, that same smile full of hope. Her sister took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger. We watched her story play out on a screen, her last moments captured by a camera. But Sheylla was more than that moment. She was love. She was laughter. She was light. And if her story can save even one life, then she's still here, still protecting. As the crowd bowed their heads, the wind picked up, rustling through the candles. The flames danced but didn't die, a symbol of resilience, of memory. Later that night, Detective Mendez walked past the old house on Maplewood Drive. It was quiet again. A new family had moved in, a young couple with 2 small children. The porch light glowed softly and a brand new doorbell camera blinked faintly in the dark. For a moment she stood there, her heart heavy but steady. Justice had been served, but closure was something different, something that never really came. She glanced at the sky, whispering almost to herself, "You're safe now, Sheylla, but we're still fighting for the ones who aren't." As she turned to leave, The faint sound of laughter echoed from the new family's home. A comforting, ordinary sound. And for the first time in a long time, Mendez smiled. Because maybe that's how healing begins. Not with forgetting, but with living again. The screen fades to black. A single line appears in white letters. If you or someone you know feels unsafe, speak up. Silence can be deadly. Her story doesn't have to be yours. And beneath it, justice for Sheylla, Sheylla's light, stop the silence. The closing narration comes softly, over a slow, haunting piano track. She rang the doorbell, hoping for safety. The world watched her final moments, a warning, a plea, a truth too real to ignore. But from that darkness came light, her story, her name, her legacy, because sometimes, even in death, love finds a way to speak. The video ends there, silent, powerful, unforgettable, and somewhere, out in the quiet suburbs, another doorbell camera blinks in the night, watching, listening, protecting. Because of her,